I found out my girlfriend has been renting a second apartment for her secret lover. Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be sharing this, but I feel like you need to hear the story to the end. I've always considered myself a patient, loyal, and devoted person, especially in relationships. But it seems my whole life was preparation for the moment when I'd face the fact that trust can be shattered in an instant, like a house of cards. My name is Raphael, I'm 29 and I live in Milan. I had a girlfriend, Livia. She seemed perfect, smart, beautiful, with an incredible sense of style and charisma that could captivate anyone in the room. We'd been together for almost 3 years. Everyone thought we had perfect relationships, and I always thought so too. We rented a small but cozy apartment in the city center together. We had shared plans, joint trips, and everything seemed great. But one late evening, I accidentally noticed a strange notification in her email. At first, I didn't think much of it. It was a letter from a real estate agency with an address and keys to another apartment. My heart froze when I realized this wasn't for us. It was a separate apartment registered solely in Livia's name. Instinct told me something was wrong, but my mind tried to convince me. Maybe it's a gift for a friend. Maybe it's something work-related. I started watching. The next day, Livia suddenly asked me to help with some paperwork, and I noticed she looked unusually tense, as if afraid I might see something. I tried asking directly, but she just smiled and changed the subject. That's when I decided I had to figure it out myself. I took my day off and, under the pretext of a walk, went to the apartment. My heart was pounding like it was about to burst out of my chest. There was a small key hanging on the door, identical to the one in the letter. I went inside and froze. The interior was luxurious, modern, with expensive furniture and details I'd never heard about from Livia. Then my attention was drawn to a note on the table. "Don't think you'll find me here." My heart sank. At that moment I realized Livia was hiding someone or something from me. My imagination ran wild. Lover, secret meetings, lie after lie. I felt a mix of horror, anger, and betrayal. And worse yet, I realized this could have been going on for months and I had no idea. I went back home, trying to keep a straight face as if nothing had happened, but inside, a feeling of betrayal boiled that words can't describe. I tried to recall every detail, every moment when she might have been hiding something from me. The slightest glance, phrase, gesture, everything now had a new meaning. The next day, I started cautiously checking her phone, messages, email, and everything I found confirmed my worst fears. Livia was meeting someone in secret from me. Every meeting was carefully hidden, every detail meticulously concealed. I felt my life turning upside down. I tried to understand why. Why was she doing this? For what? I felt like I was in the plot of a psychological thriller where I was the victim who hadn't noticed the obvious. Questions multiplied. How long had she been hiding this? Who is this person? And why couldn't I, Raphael, see the signs earlier? And here I am, Reddit, because I don't know what to do next. Trust is destroyed, the relationship is on the brink of catastrophe, and I feel like a betrayed person trapped in my own love. Inside me live two Raphaels. One wants to leave and destroy everything. The other wants to understand, forgive, and save what's left. But the answer to what next is unknown to me. The next day, I decided I couldn't live in constant tension anymore, pretending I knew nothing, and pretending the relationship was the same as before. I understood that every step I took now required caution, because any wrong move could destroy everything for good, and I needed to hear the truth from Livia herself. I waited for the moment when we'd be alone, and when she might not be able to dodge questions, to finally face reality head-on. When she came home in the evening, I was sitting on the couch, trying to keep myself together, but my heart was pounding like it was ready to break out. I looked at Livia and tried to speak calmly, though a hurricane of emotions raged inside me. "Livia, we need to talk," I said, trying not to tremble. She looked at me, her smile strained like a mask her eyes couldn't hold. She immediately knew something was wrong, and her face turned white as if she'd seen a ghost. "What's wrong?" she asked, pretending not to understand. I took a deep breath and said, "I know about the second apartment, Livia, I saw it, and I know someone lives there, or you're meeting someone in secret from me." At first she froze, then her eyes filled with anger and fear at the same time. I saw her trying to find words to deceive me, but I couldn't allow myself to believe her excuses anymore. We started arguing. I asked questions one after another, each of Livia's sentences becoming more defensive and tense. "Raphael, it's not what you think," she said finally, but her voice trembled and I felt the truth was close, but she wasn't ready to admit it yet. I tried to understand. Was it a lover, a friend? What secret had she been hiding so carefully for months? Every phrase of hers sounded like an attempt to mask the truth, and it felt like I was on the verge of a revelation that would change everything. I recalled every little thing: strange calls, nighttime walks without explanations, unusual bills and expenses she made in secret. All these things now formed a single picture, and I saw her true face, which had seemed almost perfect to me before. I realized our story would never be the same, and the trust we'd built over years was destroyed in an instant, like a house of cards in a gust of wind. Livia finally confessed, not fully, but enough for me to understand that my worst fears were confirmed. She really had another person, and the apartment was for him. With every second of her story, I felt something breaking inside me, as if my hands could no longer hold what had once been our shared life. I tried to understand how I could have missed this earlier, how I could trust someone who was secretly building her life behind my back. The conversation lasted almost an hour. I asked questions, she answered, sometimes dodging the point, sometimes outright lying. But I already understood the main thing. The love that seemed genuine to me was actually an illusion, carefully crafted to hide betrayal. And though part of me wanted to scream, cry, and destroy everything around, another part understood. I needed to act coolly, or I'd become part of this catastrophe myself. In the end, I stood up and said, "Livia, I can't live like this anymore. You destroyed our trust, and I can't just forgive it. I need to leave." She tried to grab my hand, begging, "Raphael, please, I can explain." But I'd already made my choice. I knew our story was over, though just recently I'd believed we had a future. That evening, I sat on the balcony of our apartment, looking at the twinkling lights of Milan and feeling the emptiness around me become almost physical. I thought about how many days, weeks, and months I'd lived in illusion, not noticing the truth, and how painful it was to realize that love can be deception. But inside me, a thought also began to emerge that sometimes leaving is the only way to save yourself, the only way to protect what's still pure and real inside. And though I understood that ahead lay months of regrets, doubts, and struggles with myself, I also felt that I'd taken the first step toward liberation from a toxic connection that was destroying my life from within, and that in the future, perhaps, I could trust and love again, but with caution, with an understanding of the value of trust and honesty in relationships. The days following that evening became a real test for me, Raphael, as if every second pulled me down into an abyss of distrust and pain, and every step through the streets of Milan felt heavy, as if the whole city reflected the inner chaos raging in me after the truth about Livia came out. I couldn't just return to normal life, because every memory of her smile, her voice, how she tenderly touched my hand, was now tinged with the bitterness of betrayal, and I constantly caught myself thinking that everything we'd built together turned out to be an illusion. I tried to focus on work, but thoughts wouldn't let go, and every notification on my phone caused a shiver, because I feared new messages from Livia, feared she'd try to convince me to restore trust or justify herself. Deep down, I understood that forgiving her was impossible, and trying to do so would destroy me even more. But at the same time, I felt drawn to her, as part of me still sought explanation, justification, though reason screamed that it shouldn't be. Those around me started noticing my change. Friends asked what happened, but I just shook my head, trying to hide the inner turmoil. I saw how my friend Julia, a colleague from work, looked at me with slight surprise and concern, trying to understand what was going on, and I realized that people around sensed the change in my aura, in my mood, and I had to pretend everything was fine, though inside I felt shattered. Every night I replayed the conversation with Livia in my head, every gesture, every word, and tried to understand why she went for this betrayal, what made her seek a secret lover, hiding the apartment and deceiving me for months. I tried to find justification, but each time I faced emptiness, with the understanding that the love I believed in was a lie and that I'd become just part of her game. But life doesn't stop, even when the heart is torn to pieces. I started thinking about how to move forward, how to restore my trust in people, how to feel safe again. And gradually I realized that the first step is to accept the pain, acknowledge that the betrayal happened, and not try to justify her, because only through honesty with myself can I regain inner strength. A few weeks after the breakup, I got an unexpected call from Livia. Her voice was quiet, almost pleading, and she tried to explain her motives, talking about her fears, loneliness, and how she wanted to refresh our life through forbidden feelings. But I realized her words no longer had power. I listened, nodded, asked a few questions to understand what she felt, and then just hung up. I realized that sometimes people choose destruction, and you can't change someone else's choice, but you can choose your own path, and my path was now free from illusions and deception. A month later, I started seeing a psychologist to discuss what I'd been through, to learn to trust again and understand my boundaries in relationships, and each session was like a little brick, rebuilding the destroyed foundation of my psyche. I understood that betrayal would leave scars, but those scars would become a reminder that true love requires honesty and respect, and that I could never again allow myself to be deceived under the mask of perfect relationships. One evening, walking along the Navigli embankment, I looked at the reflection of lights in the water and thought about how love can be deceptive, how loved ones can betray, but life goes on, and every choice, even painful, leads to self-understanding. I realized that Livia made her choice and I made mine, to leave for myself, for my integrity and future, where trust and respect would be the foundation of new relationships. The finale turned out to be both painful and liberating. I lost the love I believed in, but gained the understanding that true strength is the ability to see the truth and act in accordance with yourself, even if it destroys what seemed unshakable. And in this drama of betrayal, I found the moral. You can't let others decide your life for you. You can't close your eyes to betrayal for the sake of illusion. And true love is when two people build a life on honesty, respect, and trust, not on secret apartments and deception. When the news about Livia and her secret apartment started gradually leaking into our social circle, I felt like every step I took was now being evaluated, discussed, as if I'd become a character in someone else's play that I didn't want to be in. Friends, colleagues, and even distant acquaintances who had seemed neutral before started asking cautious questions, making half hints, and every time someone mentioned her name, a mix of anger and fatigue arose inside me, as if every remark was a dagger and every glance a judgment for once trusting. My best friend Julia, with whom I sometimes walked around Milan after work, sat across from me in a cafe, and her eyes reflected a mix of sympathy and surprise. She didn't hide that she was shocked by Livia's actions, and cautiously asked how I was coping with the situation, understanding that the pain I was experiencing could be unbearable for anyone who'd ever relied on another. And looking at her, I realized how important it is to have people around who see the truth and don't judge too quickly. Family ties also made themselves known. Livia's parents, upon learning about the situation, first tried to justify her actions, explaining that it's all from stress and pressure. But with each of my stories, each document confirming the existence of the apartment and secret lover, their faces changed. From confusion and doubt to despair and pain, because they realized their daughter was hiding not just a secret, but a life she built behind my back, and the trust between us was destroyed for good. Trying to restore at least the remnants of my personal life, I started visiting friends again. But every time the conversation turned to love and relationships, I felt the shadow of betrayal hanging over me, and that no one, even the closest, could fully understand what it means to live with the realization that your other half secretly created another life behind your back, and every piece of advice from friends, every comment like, "just forget her," clashed with my inner struggle between the desire to forgive and the need to close this chapter forever. Work became my refuge, but even there I felt the consequences. Colleagues who accidentally learned about the events looked at me with interest and curiosity, and sometimes even with slight judgment, as if I should have prevented it all in advance, though no one understands how hard it is to trust when the heart naively believes in the honesty of a loved one. And this social reaction added an extra layer of stress and fatigue, exhausting me emotionally, and forcing me to seek solitude to disconnect from the constant stream of others' opinions for at least a few hours. Internal monologues became my salvation. I wrote down all thoughts, all emotions, every if only and why, trying to understand where I might have gone wrong, where I was blind to the signs, and where Livia was so skillful that she hid her motives so deeply that even the most attentive person couldn't recognize them. And every evening before bed, I returned to these reflections, realizing that forgiveness and understanding are different things, and that I must learn to separate my emotions from others' actions to feel like the master of my life again. At the same time, I started analyzing what exactly led to this drama. Our conversations about the future, her constant pressure on finances, need for control, my attempts to maintain harmony, and the realization that sometimes love turns into a high-stakes game where the stakes are trust and emotional safety. And if someone decides to play unfairly, the result is always catastrophic. The final moral of this story gradually formed in my head. Betrayal can't always be prevented, and you can't always predict others' actions, but you can choose your reaction. You can learn to set boundaries, and you can build relationships so that honesty and respect are an integral part of any union. And let the scars remain on the heart. They will become a lesson, a reminder that trust can't be given recklessly, and love shouldn't be based on fear, secrets, and lies, even if it seems feelings are stronger than all rational arguments. When I finally decided that this chapter of my life must be closed, I realized that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and doesn't mean returning everything to how it was, but means consciously separating yourself from a toxic situation that could destroy your personality, your principles, and your idea of trust. I started with the simple. I notified Livia that I no longer wanted to continue the relationship, that every secret, every lie, and every hidden apartment destroyed everything that ever connected us, and that now our lives must go separate ways. Her reaction was as I expected, a mix of anger, incomprehension, and despair. She tried to justify her actions with words about pressure, financial necessity, and fear of losing me. But no explanation could bridge the abyss that arose between us. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes people, even those we love, make choices that contradict all moral and human norms, and that no feelings justify betrayal that leaves a mark for life. The social consequences turned out to be unexpectedly powerful. Friends I trusted supported me without question, shared my pain, and were amazed at how far Livia could go in her double life. Colleagues who had discussed me with interest and suspicion before now began to see me with respect, as someone who managed to cope with the catastrophe, didn't stoop to revenge, and didn't let anger control his life, but simply made a difficult decision for his own mental and emotional health. Livia's parents first tried to protect her, claiming it was just youthful mistakes. But after I provided evidence, they started distancing themselves, and in their eyes, I saw a mix of regret and understanding that their daughter's hidden actions destroyed not only the relationship between us, but also trust in the family. And that feeling of guilt hanging on the shoulders of every parent who ever underestimated the consequences of hidden lies turned out to be more tormenting than any material losses. Gradually, over the weeks, I began rebuilding my life. I returned to my hobbies, meetings with friends, walks around the city, which now seemed not only the scene of betrayal, but also a space for a new beginning, for personal growth and reevaluation of values I always considered important. Honesty, openness, respect for myself and others, and understanding that sometimes forgiveness is an act not for the one who caused pain, but for yourself, to free yourself from anger, resentment, and powerlessness. A few months later, I met people who became a new source of trust and support for me. Their lives were transparent, sincere, and I gradually began to understand that the experience of betrayal, no matter how destructive the situation, can become a powerful lesson that teaches you to distinguish people who deserve your openness from those who use trust as a tool for their hidden games. And this understanding gave me inner strength that had seemed unattainable before. Livia, in turn, faced the consequences of her actions. The secret lover she hid so carefully learned about the revelation of her double life, and their relationship fell apart, leaving her with a sense of guilt and the realization that deception can't exist forever without payback, and that every action, even the most cunning and carefully hidden, sooner or later leads to destruction that can't be undone. The final moral of the story I drew was simple but profound. Human trust is a sacred space that can't be violated without consequences. Love doesn't mean submission, and respect for a partner doesn't lie in manipulations or secrets. And most importantly, sometimes true victory lies not in punishing those who betrayed you, but in preserving your own dignity, restoring your boundaries, and learning to walk through life with an open heart, despite the scars of the past. And when I looked at the city, at the streets that were once the scene of my pain, now filled with light and new energy, I understood that betrayal leaves scars but shouldn't define your future. Every new day is a chance to build a life based on honesty, respect, and inner peace, and it was this understanding that gave me a sense of redemption, albeit with bitterness in my heart, because the lessons life teaches are sometimes the most painful, the most valuable,